What's up, guys? In this video, I want to do something a little bit different. This is sort of a editor's reaction to their timeline, the editing. For me, one of my favorite things to do is actually to open up old timelines or watch older videos and sort of see where my brain was at creatively while assembling that. So I'm gonna dig into an old project file of mine, which is a short film / commercial thing that I did for the company Woodbine for their Queen's Plate style guide. Now, if you guys haven't taken a look at the video, I'd recommend taking a peek at that, but we're gonna go through a whole sort of comprehensive view of the timeline. I'm gonna let you sort of hop into the pilot seat, the driver's seat of my edit sequence and sort of take a look at what this overwhelming timeline looks and feels like, so you can get a better grasp of how a commercial or immersive sort of film would cut together. So let's open it up. Already you're gonna take a look at the timeline. There's a couple unlinked things, and that's one thing. It's like whenever you open up an old timeline, there might be like a few things that just don't link, so forgive me for that. What you're gonna see is just all these multi-tracks here, and overwhelming, oh my God, this very daunting layers of sound here. This is ridiculous. Oh my God. And we just like sort of like single out certain sounds. Like, what's this one? Right, so I added in just like one track. Basically, I was telling a story through all the different audio tracks. So like one audio track is the announcer building out that narrative, and I actually used that as sort of what I would structure my visuals to. So I actually found the audio clip that I wanted to use, placed that in as sort of the spine or backbone, and then started like layering stuff on top. That's something that's really important, is like whenever you shoot something, especially when it's like commercial based or maybe a little bit more B-roll, documentary style, having some sort of structure backbone that you can find in the edit can really help start to assemble that footage, so therefore you're not sort of like going all over the place. So I use this audio track. One of them was like a clock ticking, another one was like the slow-mo sound of the horses trampling into the dirt.
Go blue a second, and they have about a 16th of a mile to go, and it's Key to the Moon's race. Key to the Moon is coming down the wire. Here's Let's Go Blue up on the inside.
And the other one was like the low kind of droney score that brought everything together, and then just like sound effects of like clicks, hits, and all of that fun stuff. Now, if we continue through the timeline, the first thing you're gonna notice is like the CinemaScope 235 aspect ratio thing over the top. Now, the reason why I do that in my timeline, some of you might be like, well, Zach, why don't you just do a widescreen timeline? Well, the big thing is for this video specifically, I want to hop in and out of like full screen or widescreen. So I actually just threw this in there as sort of like if I wanted to jump between those aspect ratios. Because if you change your aspect ratio in your sequence to, let's say, full widescreen, so that would be like 815 by 1080, you're limiting your aspect ratio and you can't kind of go out of that. So at least having these black bars on the top and bottom can allow me to diversify the aspect ratio if I wanted to do so, which I believe I did. Now let's kind of continue going through this timeline and looking at sort of the creative choices as I go through this. One of the big ones that if we zoom in and scale in onto this is you'll notice that I use sort of this like crazy triple effect here, which is an assemblance of a few different things. And I wanted to create sort of the effect of like a camera photo being taken in this gritty, weird vibe that sort of flashes through it. So I used multiple layers to create this effect. First one being this like old video effect that I have is like just like this film Bernie type thing. I'll see if I can find those and source those out, but there'll be a link to the Spectrum pack from Shutterstock Elements, which has a bunch of these effects included in that. So I like these film Bernie things, and then what I did was, for this sequence specifically, I did a bit of a scale in on my shot. So if we played it out, it sort of like jumped in, creating its own sort of like practical transition. And then I shot just like one shot. This was like the camera, oh yeah, I remember doing this. The camera, I just like finished up a shot and then the camera just swooshed around a little bit. So I used that as sort of like a transition piece, as like a whip pan transition to get me into the shots here, which I wanted to use a little bit more close-ups for the beginning, like showing wides of our models for this video. I didn't want to reveal until a little bit later, so I stayed close, and that's something that you guys can utilize or implement, and it sort of uses a technique that I sort of, I don't know, coined the title ramp editing, where basically you're slowly revealing, you're slowly building, and a good way to build intensity through a video is by doing a slow reveal, a slow peel. So starting out close, so you don't really know what's going on, and then you're like getting wider and wider and wider through the coverage that you are revealing.
As they move through the stretch for the first time, Max TV coming on to...
So, and you're also showing more and more. So for this timeline, if you look at it, it starts out, the shots are a lot longer for the very beginning, and then as it progresses, the shots get tighter and tighter and tighter, till by the end, we're going through like this multi-layered sort of experience. Now let's continue zipping through the timeline and looking at some other fun and cool effects that we have in here. One of the big ones that I threw into this edit was this flashing effect. If you take a peek, now this can probably have its own tutorial, but we'll just give it a little quick micro one. If we press play, you see how the cameras just sort of flash? And so I actually spent a little while actually creating and developing this flash effect, and I created it in its own timeline. So that way I had some diverse flashes that I could play around with. So for example, the first set of flashes was this triple flash that I created. And literally I created it by creating a white layer by going into File, New, Color Matte, and then just creating a white color matte. And then I changed its settings. And then what I did was I changed its position, so I dragged it down to the bottom of the frame here, and then I created a edge feather and made it kind of feather out on the edge on the bottom, because when you take a photo in a video, it'll go like this. It'll take different spots of the sensor. So I just tried recreating that here. So when you press play, you just get like this kind of flash effect. And then the final flash frame, I actually took that white layer and I made it into a difference in the blend mode. And then I just kind of created a whole timeline where I had these sort of like presets made that I could literally, if I liked a certain flash or want to diversify my flash, I grab it, drag it into my edit, and then pop it in over top, and then use that for my footage. And that way I sort of have my own sort of pre-made presets folder. So if we press play, we kind of have like those flashes, and those flashes were a bit of a theme. They were the vessel of this video. If you guys don't know what a vessel is, you're like, Zach, why did you look in camera and do the little finger wave? That's because I did a whole movie on that. I'll have a link to that in the description below. So as we continue going through this, again, building that intensity, building that veracity throughout this edit. Another key thing that I did was this is something that you should keep in mind, is not only as a storyteller, if you're like, let's say, directing and editing and you shot the video too, you're gonna have a library of shots that are your favorites, the ones that really stand out to you. For me, this was one of the ones that I really liked. And what you have to do when you go through your video, be that if you're assembling your edit, is make sure you're conscious of when you implement, let's say, your favorite shots into the edit. So for example, I actually sprinkled my favorite shots throughout the video. So I started it with one of my favorite shots, which is the horses running, and that sort of happens very close to the beginning. And I wanted to sort of catch the audience's attention with this really intense moment that was one of my favorite shots. And then you put another one of your little favorite micro moments in the middle, and then also at the end, and then you hopefully every moment is your favorite, but like your ultimate favorites, put them, scatter them apart throughout the video, because that keeps your audience's attention span, and it also doesn't fire out all of your ammo at once. So this video, I really tried to sprinkle it with my favorite moments throughout it. And anywhere that sort of dipped and didn't feel like it gauged my interest, I would spend more time and effort and energy to try and elevate that, so at least it was sort of all the same level of quality. So that's something that you'll notice, and that's what I noticed throughout this edit, is my favorite shots draw out a lot longer, and the ones that maybe needed a little bit more effort, time, or energy, I did more effects and stuff into it to keep it more interesting. That is another key point to notice within this timeline, is something that you should keep in mind is understanding the flow and rhythm of an edit, and watching it constantly edit, then watch, then edit, then watch, then edit, then watch. If you're just editing and just like it's just flowing through it. That's great for productivity, but it might not be great for storytelling. The most important thing that you guys can do, and what I did like a million times, was I made a choice, like a creative edit choice. So for example, if we look into the timeline here, let's say I added in this shot of B-roll of the horses running and then shot to the grandstands. I would then go back to maybe 20 seconds in that timeline, then press play and watch that go through to make sure it felt good. If it doesn't feel good, then you gotta go back to the drawing board and keep editing. Now, let's just sort of skim through this timeline and go through a couple other moments and interesting things throughout this timeline. There was sort of like a rubric that I stuck to for this video, and I'll have maybe a bit more of a comprehensive look at that in another one. But essentially, there were some checklists, things that I had to get done for this edit. A few of them being, I had to show all of the models who were presented in this edit. I wanted to incorporate a series of, I think, 4 different timelines, one of them being the old vintage stock footage, the photographer taking the photos, the people getting the photos taken of them, and B-roll of the property and actually the race happening. And I wanted all 4 of those things to correspond with each other and weave into each other to create a dynamic edit. And that's called thread storytelling, at least that's what I call it, which I can sink into a little bit further in a future video or other video. But essentially, I sort of played, obviously, with that flow rhythm. I'd watch it and see how it felt, but then I also had to make sure that I was hitting all of the beats that I had in mind. So the models, the shots of the race, the vintage stock footage, and the photographer, all of that stuff had to sort of keep coming in and out at a really decent rhythm. You didn't like watch it and then all of a sudden like something that you forgot about and all of a sudden it comes up a little bit later. It had to consistently stay in the back of the audience's brain. And B, I actually forget what B was because I got so caught up in point A, but you get that point. So let's continue going through. Another thing that I did was I did this fade effect through to this trophy shot. Oh yeah, that was another timeline. I did like trophy shot sequence. And for this, I added the fade in just to sort of like create an interesting blend. Don't be afraid to add fades into your timelines. I know a lot of people are like, whoa, fades, no, that's super cheesy. Do a zoom transition. Fades are actually really useful. I absolutely love them. Their traditional cliche used to be overused. Now I don't think they're used enough, but they do a lot of work for a very classic effect. So definitely tinker with that. It can show passage of time, it can show blending between 2 shots, and if you feel like a shot's not flowing, attempt throwing in a little fade, see what happens. Model shots, the flashes, and then I wanted to add in some titles at the end. Usually commercials do that, but it's not like to make it fit into the family of like commercials and stuff. It was actually to make the audience have a message at the end, because it was like all of these messages, all of these things, this story, all this stuff floating around in people's brains, and then I knew text would really tie it in together. So it's like, what does all this stuff mean? You're asking a question of the audience, like, right? You take them on this journey, you ask the question, which is, when it comes to race day, what will you be wearing? Will you be ready? Ties it all in, and then you're like, we're ready for what? And then it'll be the photo finish, and it's like to tie it in with the photo clicking and everything. So anyway, that's like the funnel that brings it all in together. Story, narrative funnel, where you start off with a bunch of questions, a bunch of random footage zigzagging all over the place, and then you tie it all together with your vessel, your theme, your intense editing, and then that message that like is the fabric that does the weaving and metaphors, and this is a huge timeline. There's a lot of craziness that happened. This is like a very complex video. So first off, let me know if this was helpful for you. Now that is just a quick breeze through. There's a lot of stuff in this edit, as you can tell as you watch it. But that's a little test drive. If you want to learn more about this timeline, let me know. I can reopen it and do another video talking about, let's say, the sound design, talking about creating proxies for it, the diversity of steady cam shots compared to like tripod shots compared to handheld. What does that mean? And also thread style storytelling. This is a huge monster project. That being said, also, if you guys enjoy me doing these like timeline breakdowns, I have a lot of fun looking into them and sort of narrating what my experience was like editing it. So let me know if that is your cup of tea, if that's interest of you. If you get excited about this stuff and you feel like you gained a lot of knowledge, please write that in the comments, or else I might continue making these and you might not even enjoy them. So, circling back, that's it, that's all. For those of you who like the videos that I'm making and want to continue on this filmmaking journey with me, you guys can like this video, comment and let me know what you thought of it, and hit that button that rhymes with prescribe. And that's it. I've actually got to do real editing now rather than just looking at a timeline and talking about it. So keep making some great stuff, keep it fresh, and I'll see you all in another video.